Hi kiddos, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about how therapy can help you and of course misconceptions around therapy, as you would have seen in the title. So one thing I want to make clear, this video is not a video to convince you. It is not a video where I'm trying to shove therapy down anybody's throat, because I know that there are people out there that just don't agree with therapy, that don't like it, the whole idea, whatever. I'm going to be talking about my experience with therapy and also what I have observed in general. If you're interested in that, then feel free to stick around. So we're going to start out with the misconceptions around therapy. Number one, you don't need to be broken or have something wrong with you in order to go to therapy. You are not mental if you are thinking about your mental health. It is normal to need help. It is normal to struggle with things. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just like your physical health can struggle, your mental health can struggle too. And just because your mental health is struggling, it doesn't make you mental. Number two, going to therapy doesn't make you special or selfish. It makes you empowered and strong. Being able to admit to your feelings is incredibly brave, and you don't have to experience everything on your own. Remember, even the strongest of people need help from time to time. Keep the goal of living a life that is as fulfilling as possible as your North Star. You don't need to keep suffering. You're allowed to feel better about yourself and about your life, so put yourself in positions that give you access to that. Number three, your therapist is there to reflect to you your blind spots, not to judge your character. This can actually scare a lot of people because it means facing oneself. There are things about ourselves that we don't want to look at. They're icky, they're scary, it makes us uncomfortable, it makes us question our identity, quite honestly. And this will be coming up later on in this video. But I've said this before on my channel, the more you turn away from a part of yourself, this little cub, if you will, the thing that scares you, the more of a ferocious lion it seems to be. It's only when you finally decide to look at it for what it is do you realize that it's just a cub. And it's the neglecting of that cub that continues to damage and hurt you. Number four, you might be the person that thinks, well, what could they possibly tell me that I don't already know about myself? Well, you won't know until you go. Also, one other thing is these people have literally studied brains and people. They might know a thing or two. But like I said, they highlight to you your blind spots. Think about when you're driving a car, for example. You check your mirrors and you also make an effort to check your blind spots, because what are the consequences if you don't do that, right? So, effectively, a therapist will hold a mirror up to your blind spots, allowing you to take a look and basically effectively be safer in the vehicle that is your life. And really, it's not that scary once you look at it. Number five, a lot of people assume that therapy is a magical fix-all and that this person is going to tell you exactly what to do with your life, but no. To be honest, I made this mistake too, many times. And I'd come out of therapy feeling frustrated because I felt like an open wound. And the thing is, yes, therapy can be raw. It can be incredibly vulnerable. But the therapist won't push you to go beyond what you're ready to do. Everything is at your own pace. And I'll mention this again later, but I've had sessions where I wouldn't exactly describe them as productive. It is entirely what you choose for it to be. It's a safe space for you and you only. Therapy effectively exists to give you the tools to handle your life and to be able to take care of yourself and live the most fulfilled life you possibly can. Someone else isn't there to make the decisions for you. They're there to empower you to make better decisions for yourself. Whether it's something as big as your life choices like marriage and going to university, or if it's something as small as just saying no, standing up for yourself. Therapy is there to empower you. For example, I've had therapy sessions where I'll talk about the most mundane things, like how my day was, or how my week has been, or how somebody said something and it made me feel like XYZ, but it's not that big a deal. And sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you just need a space to vent because there's no other place in your life where you can do that. And that's okay. But sometimes therapy is a space where you can also just be more vulnerable, where you can get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. And you might wonder, well, why would I want to do that? Let me put it this way. Sometimes what we do with things in our life is we could have experienced a trauma, right? Say, for example, let's look at it like this. You got a rhinoplasty done, that's a nose job, or a breast augmentation, that's a boob job. Say you got that done and there was a complication. In order to correct that complication, you will have to go in and get your surgery sort of redone effectively. And yes, you're going to be sore. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it hurts. But you're doing it for the greater good of either, for example, being able to breathe or just to live without pain. So like you might go to a surgeon to have something corrected, you can go to a therapist to not necessarily, let's not put it in the way that you need to have something corrected about yourself. You're not broken, but that you can heal something. and make it healthier for yourself. Why live with a burst implant? You know what I mean? Number 6. People often associate their art with therapy. One thing I want to make clear is that therapy is not the same as catharsis. Like I said, therapy can leave you feeling kind of raw and vulnerable. And yes, to some extent, catharsis, whatever that might be for you, whether it's singing or dancing or painting or writing, whatever your form of output, your energetic, cathartic output is, it might make you feel the same way. But therapy is like a corrective surgery, where catharsis might be something like a massage that you get to, I guess, soften, tighten muscles, let's just say. Sorry about the terminology. Therapy won't do that. Therapy is fixing or healing the root of the issue, not just treating the symptoms of it. Therapy's role is to acknowledge your vices, your catharsis, your art, let's just say. And it's not to necessarily remove these things unless, for example, they are harming you or harming the people around you. Therapy instead inquires that if you carrying this hurt around with you is actually what's best for you. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's good to just have our forms of catharsis for our expression of hurt. But to carry it around with us for the rest of the day is a weight that we don't need. And it's heavy, and it's a burden that we shouldn't have to bear, and therapy helps us to alleviate some of the weight of that. And if you don't have methods of catharsis, if you don't have methods of art that help you, then therapy can help you to find that. It allows you to explore what feels good to you, not what should feel good, not what society says is acceptable. Therapy allows you to get in touch with yourself, and that can be a scary thing, but it can also be incredibly freeing. Another thing is people often feel that they need to constantly be in pain in order to be a good artist. That is not the case. You don't have to constantly remain in pain. You're allowed to feel joy. That too is a human emotion that you are entitled to experience. You don't have to remain tortured for your existence to be valid. And honestly, if you can't look at your whole self, that means that you're afraid. And fear is okay. Fear is normal. But what are you going to do about it? Are you going to let the things that hurt you control you? Or are you going to finally look at them for what they are and take ownership of them? I can promise you, by never looking at the things that hurt you deep down, the power will always remain out of your hands. You will always be at the mercy of that trauma and how it affects you, at times without even realizing it. Number 7. That's not right. Number 7, the therapist recognizes that the people that you talk about in therapy are whole people. They're not there to judge you or the people in your lives. These people are qualified to understand that the people that you are talking about are whole individual people too. People that are more often than not hurting themselves. So you don't need to concern yourself with the thought of betraying other people when you go to therapy and talk about them. In all honesty, it is more than okay to need a space to vent, to release, to have someone hear you, validate you, see you. It is more than okay. The thing is, these things like being seen, being validated, etc., it sounds so mundane, but when these things are swept under the rug, it can lead to toxic, explosive behaviors later on. And when I say this, I don't mean to label you as toxic or that you have inherently explosive, crazy behaviors. I just mean that this can happen to anybody. Think of it like this. When you take a fizzy drink and you shake it and shake it and shake it, eventually it's going to explode. Like when you go to open it, it's going to explode. Similarly, you have an infection, you treat it with antibiotics, but you don't finish the course. Why? Because you're like, oh, well, it's looking okay, so why would I finish the course? But then you don't realize that you need to finish the course because otherwise you have basically antibiotic resistance, and basically you end up keeping the infection, and it just gets worse, which is not ideal for anyone, right? So taking care of yourself is not something to be neglected. It's not something that's selfish. It's not something that, where it's about betraying other people. No, therapy is not a space where you betray people. Therapy is a space where you advocate for yourself. It's a space for you to have your needs listened to. And no parent is perfect. And so given that fact, probably there is a chance that when you were growing up, there's something that your parents missed out on, or something that your guardians missed out on, even if it wasn't that. Something as you were going through your teenage years or your young adulthood. You never know. Or maybe you never had any trauma or anything like that, and it's just something later in life that you need help processing. Addressing different emotions, it doesn't make you emotional in a way with a negative connotation, like as if you're weak. You're not weak. You're just a human being, and to experience emotion is normal. And it's okay. And it's okay to need a space to do that outside of what your catharsis might be. Emotion can be beautifully expressed through art, through catharsis, but it's also good to allow yourself to heal. And you won't lose what makes you brilliant if you let yourself heal too. You know, at the end of the day, it's just you when you go to bed. It's you with yourself. You're your own constant in life, as I've always said. And you want to be able to live with yourself. And if you can live with the thing that hurts you the most, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But a lot of people can't. It eats away at a lot of people, and it costs them other things in their life, and sometimes they don't realize until it's too late. Number 8, they won't understand, they can't understand. You know what? Yes, you're right. There is a part of your subjective experience that they, the therapist, will never fully understand. Just like your friend or your sibling. We can't literally be in each other's shoes. But the way that you feel right now, or in general, they will have witnessed other people that feel that way. They would have helped other people that feel that way. And another thing to remember is the purpose of this is not necessarily to be entirely understood. A lot of people will think with therapy that these people are just out for money. You know, here I am opening up and telling them everything and they're not even going to fully understand me. Like, what's the point? But the best way I can put it is this. Let's say, for example, your favorite color is green. My favorite color is blue. Our experience of having a favorite color is the same. We're not going to get into a disagreement about which color is better or which color is more valid as a preference. Each experience is valid, and we both understand the feeling of having a favorite color, let's just say. So therapy is just like that. You're basically stating how you experience a color, and a therapist is not out there to change that unless it harms you or the people around you. That's it. One last thing regarding this misconception is that just because you're used to carrying around this weight with you, it doesn't mean that it's okay or that you have to carry on carrying it with you. You see, your trauma doesn't have to be your personality. Your trauma doesn't have to make up your whole story. You get to decide what your story is. And sometimes these things that we're holding on to, this baggage, honestly, it's just falling apart, quite honestly. And it's just weighing us down. And just because you're used to something and you've supposedly moved on from something, it doesn't mean that you've actually dealt with it. It's like how I've said in a previous video, putting band-aids over bullet holes. Because if you had dealt with it, then it wouldn't feel so heavy all the time. It wouldn't be something that constantly comes up, something that bothers you so regularly. In going to therapy, you gain access to somebody who will ask you questions about this baggage that you're carrying, why it's so special to you, why it's so important, what's in the baggage, how many pieces of baggage there are. You know, you get to discuss this thing that you clearly are so attached to, otherwise you wouldn't be dragging it around with you everywhere. And you get to do it in a safe space where you're not judged, and this person can help you to unpack that, let's just say. And they can decide which pieces of baggage, or more specifically, help you decide which pieces of baggage are essential for you to still carry with you at this moment in time or moving into the future. Which parts can be unpacked, which parts can, you know what, we don't need to unpack that for another 5 to 10 years. Or maybe, you know what, that's a bag that's heaviest, let's go and let's sort that out first. A therapist can help you to alleviate some of the weight, or just help you to jiggle things about a bit so that the bag isn't busting at the seams, right? It's not a perfect process, but it can be incredibly empowering and very much a relief to go and get that help. Now let's talk about part 2 of this video, why you might want to try therapy. In case the first portion of this video wasn't insightful enough for you, again, I'm not trying to outright convince anybody, but these are just some of the things I've noticed, and if it convinces you to an extent, okay, great. But again, I'm not here to push anything on anyone. If you're here this far, then we might as well talk about it, why you might want to try therapy. If there is something that bothers you on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and you figuring it out on your own is not really working, that's okay. Maybe this self-treatment isn't working. So instead, go and find out what will work for you. If you're looking to sort of destigmatize the idea of therapy as well, one example that I could give you is this. The way that you would go to a doctor, a GP, to talk about your physical health, you'd go to a therapist to talk about your mental health. And I'll be honest, coming from, I didn't even want to say like an Asian background necessarily, but just me, right? I find it strange that mental health is a thing. I mean, how do you even sort of look at that overall? But the best way I can describe it is if you are feeling blocked up here, you feel like you're constantly hitting a wall, there is something about a habit or a pattern that you keep repeating, which I'll mention later, or an emotion that really hurts you that you can't seem to get rid of no matter what you do, that could count as your mental health. It's the way that your thoughts are tinged. If you look at your thoughts kind of like, let's just say clouds, right? That's kind of what they say in the sort of meditation example. And imagine that each of these clouds is tinted with a hue, a color that represents an emotion. It's the degree to which your clouds are tinted. And if they're tinted to an extent that is harmful, where it's like constantly raining, let's just say, then that's going to be really hard for you to live with. So physically you could be 10 on 10, but mentally, if it's constantly, let's just say, like black or like a dark purple or whatever color you would associate it with, like negativity and sadness and guilt and shame or whatever, that can eat away at you and it can make your life very hard to live. So just as you might go to a doctor for an ache or a pain or an infection of some sort, you can go to a therapist to talk about the clouds being a certain color that doesn't make you feel fulfilled in your day-to-day life. It's just that. And one other thing, no one can judge you for your reason. Your reason could be as big as somebody in your family had a big accident or something like that, touch wood. Or it could be as small as somebody saying a really nasty comment to you and it really got to you. And that's the thing. I say small like this because your experience is yours. You are entirely entitled to your experience of something. And just because you're going to therapy, it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that you're not empowered or getting on with your life. In fact, this is a way of getting on with your life because it means that you're trying to clear and cleanse that baggage. You don't want to be carrying things with you that are hurting you. You're trying to be a better human being overall. And in order to do that, you can't be weighed down by things that aren't serving you, whether it's negative beliefs or people that are harmful to you, right? And so really don't worry about someone like you and whether or not someone like you can go to a place like therapy. It's not like that. You're just a human being. The way that you go to the doctor, it's literally the same. It really is. And anybody that says otherwise, no, absolutely not. It is exactly the same. A GP will look at your physical side effects and whatnot. A therapist will look at your mental side effects and then dig deeper and so on and so forth, right? It's exactly the same. It is a GP, but for the mind. That is it. It is okay to ask more from yourself and your life. If no one has already told you, you don't deserve to live half a life where you're suffering continuously with no end in sight. There are already more than enough forms of suffering in this world, and you have a space here where you can alleviate some of that in a safe way. So why not do that? You deserve, listen to me, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to experience joy and fulfillment in this lifetime. Like this really, yeah, you can tell, like, sometimes I wish someone had told me that. You don't have to stay struggling. You don't have to stay down. You don't have to keep feeling so limited and blocked by yourself, by the things that hurt you in the past. You're not just the things that hurt you in the past. You're not just that victim. And happiness isn't, when I say you deserve to be happy, that doesn't mean like you're going to be happy every single day for the rest of your life and everything's going to be perfect. See, happiness, I believe, is a skill, and I've talked about this in a previous video. But there are some core things where you can do the skill side of happiness, where it's like gratitude and looking at the positive side of things. And, I've mentioned this in other videos. But there are some fundamental things that if you don't address them, they will steal your happiness from you. They will rob you of the things that are most precious to you. They will eat away at your soul and your spirit. And it sounds dramatic, but it's true. Why do you think so many people struggle with their mental health, with depression, with worse? Like podcasts that are out now where people are talking about their mental side of things, not making them mental again, of course, but the mental side to their life, whether it's their achievements or anything like that, is because we know there are certain things in our lives, whether it's our home life, our career, the things that take up so much energy, not addressing our real sexuality, our real gender identity. When we don't look at what is authentically true for us and we don't allow it to exist, we suffocate ourselves and we harm ourselves in the process. You are allowed to feel free in these things in your life. And there's probably more to this list, but why say, yes, I should be suffering in my career. Yes, I should be suffering in this romantic relationship. Yes, I should be constantly feeling horrible in my friend group. You don't have to accept that for yourself. You don't. And I don't know whether it's your parents or your local community or the media. I don't know what it is that has made you feel like you're not entitled to experience the fullest version of yourself in your life, but you don't have to listen to that. You don't have to say, yes, I agree with that. And if that makes you a rebel, and if that makes you someone that ruffles a few feathers, then so be it, because at least you're happy, at least you're content, and you will do more service to yourself and the world around you in being authentic to yourself than you will suffocating yourself. I can promise you that. Another reason you might want to try therapy is because you're scared of looking at yourself. You think that you're fine. But one thing that I have to make clear here, if I haven't already made enough clear at this point, is that just because something seems fine, just because something is operating, it doesn't mean that it's actually okay and that it's healthy. I actually read about this concept in a customer service book, and I think it was something about 5-star customer service. It was like a red book with some stars on it. I never finished it because I had to give it back to the library. But anyway, in this book it said, just because customers aren't complaining to you, it doesn't mean they're not complaining. Just because customers aren't complaining to you, it doesn't mean they're not complaining. So just because something seems fine on the surface, it doesn't mean that it's actually okay. See, what's hurting you or what is corrosive is going to find a way to come out. When I didn't address what was hurting me because I didn't know any better, at the age of 12, I started to have panic attacks. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where they came from. I thought I was dying, quite honestly. I thought I was crazy as well. And a lot of teachers made sure to look at me like I was crazy too, and talk to me like I was crazy. So that was a great experience. Of course, there were teachers that didn't, but you know, when there is pain, it is going to find a way to leak out of you. And I will talk about this later on as well. And sometimes fear speaks to us in weird ways. This is in many things in life, not just with therapy. It could come up in the way of, I don't actually need this. I'm perfectly fine as I am. Somebody of my generation, I am at this age, da 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 da. That could be the reason for exactly why you should go. Because you have this long list of excuses that is never ending. If you consistently resist something, that could be a huge reason for you needing to do that very thing. You see, looking at yourself puts you in the driver's seat. It gives you your power back in a weird way. And like I said, it feels raw at times, therapy. But once you get to the other side of that, you know yourself on a whole other level. And when you know yourself, you can work with yourself. You can be your own biggest cheerleader. No one can really say anything to you either. You know when someone will be like, oh, you have this flaw, and then all of a sudden you're like breaking down about it in private, and it eats away at you for days. It eats away at you for days because they're right. Now, again, you don't have to necessarily do this in therapy, but in therapy, what you can do is look at that thing that they said. For example, say someone says to me, Mahika, you are, let me see, what am I insecure about? Good thing it takes me some time, huh? Socially awkward. Let's say that. Mahika, you are socially awkward. Ooh, that would hurt a little, because it's true. I can be socially awkward. Social skills is something that I struggled with from a young age. I was just incredibly shy. I get a lot of anxiety, even to this day. And a lot of people, when I talk to them in public and I let them know that, oh yeah, it's something I deal with, they're like, I never would have guessed that. I never would have guessed you of all people struggle with social anxiety, but it's because I've had to work so damn hard on it, right? And so in therapy, I've been able to discuss this. In the past 10 years, I've been able to come up with techniques, tips and tricks on how to speak with people, how to ask them how they're doing, little baby steps that I can do, techniques, etc. Things to combat the thing that I am insecure about, you know? And so if somebody was to say to me, oh, you're really socially awkward, yeah, it would hurt a bit, but I could look at it and be like, right, what can I do about it if it hurts me? And I think when you sit with yourself, you can't always come up with the best techniques. Whereas if you sit with somebody who's qualified, who knows about this, who's seen it with other people, they can be like, well, look, this is what I've prescribed other people and it's worked for them. Why don't you give this a go? And then you can constantly bounce ideas off of each other. You can report back. And not only are they just looking at that one thing that you're struggling with, they can then look at the other side of it, which is like, well, maybe you had a traumatic incident which made it this way. And for me, it's social anxiety. For you, it could be something else, right? Maybe there's something else going on here. Whilst you go and you try this activity, let me go and have a look at this thing for you and see how we can dig a little more into that and make it so that this trait or this thing that somebody called you is not so much of a thing for you, or it doesn't hurt you so much. You know, it's a team effort. That's just a silly example, but I hope it helps to sort of paint a picture on how looking at yourself, yes, it can be scary, it can be intimidating in the beginning, but it can be very empowering because then you finally get to work with the full picture of who you are. If you're only looking at yourself partially, you're never checking the blind spots, then how can you fully embrace everything that you are and love all that you are? Now, this might not be a motivating factor for everybody, but sometimes when you don't go to therapy, you could be hurting yourself in so many ways. You could be hurting the people that you love. And just because, like I said before, just because they seem like they're not hurting or they seem fine, it doesn't mean that they actually are. It's very easy to stay in the state of perpetuating hurt and damage when there's no real cost, at least not at this current moment in time. But the thing is, in allowing this pain and trauma to perpetuate in whatever form it's taking on in your life, it could end up catching up with yourself or with the people or person that you love, and at that point it might be too late. In sweeping these things under the rug, you're only going to be corroding away at yourself and the things that are most precious to you. And if you care about these things, and if you know deep down that you are harming people in a way that can be helped, in a way that doesn't just have to be accepted, in a way where you wonder why you do what you do, but you don't know how to change it, then maybe therapy is for you. I know it's a big jump, but you gotta ask yourself, what do you want more? What do you care about more? The version of you that is familiar, that makes sense, where you know what the pattern is going to be, everybody around you knows what the pattern is going to be, or the version of you that's unknown, a little scary, but there's a little hope there, where maybe you don't have to keep hurting yourself and the people you love in the same way. So I mentioned this previously, but like I said, pain finds mysterious ways to make itself known. This can come out in ways like anger, right? We're constantly angry. We're constantly ready to have a fight. Or, for example, you overeat a lot. Sometimes these things like anger and poor eating habits and just simply looking away is far easier than looking at what you're actually feeling. But the thing is with this is that is very self-destructive. These things compound and they catch up with you, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships with other people, your sort of outlook on the world or perception of yourself. It harms you. And like I said, you deserve to be happy, and a huge part of being happy is not hurting. And if you doubt that, then maybe you avoiding therapy is a way for you to avoid the happiness that you know could be out there for you. You avoiding therapy is a form of self-punishment. But I want to ask you to stop, because you probably suffered enough at this point. It doesn't hurt to practice some self-compassion. It's okay to need help, to need people, for us to need each other. It is perfectly all right. Sometimes we accept negative or lower ways of being just because it's quirky or it's cute, or we saw our dad do it, or our mum do it, or our older sibling do it, or it's normalized in our local community. But just because something's normalized, it doesn't have to stay normal for you. You're allowed to ask for better for yourself. You're allowed to not stay in a cycle of living out harmful symptoms. You're allowed to dig deep and heal the thing that hurts you, that makes you feel like you need to have these symptoms, whether it's through your lack of anger management or your poor dietary habits or whatever it might be in your case. Constantly putting yourself in dangerous scenarios, for example, whatever it might be. You're allowed to take care of yourself and put yourself first. I don't mean to put this in a main character, forget about everybody type of way. I mean that in your story, you are the main character, you know, and that doesn't reduce anybody else's role. But in your story, in your life, you are the main character. And of course, the main character has influence over other people's stories and vice versa. But where is your autonomy? Where are you saying, you know, this is where I'm going to take a stand and this is where I've had enough? You're allowed to make these decisions. You're allowed to make these executive decisions, if you will, about your life and your well-being. This is yours at the end of the day. This is your book, your story, your journey. And if you feel the need to continuously punish yourself, check out my video about not hitting rock bottom on my channel. And I think that might help you to alleviate some of the guilt that you might be feeling. See, self-betrayal doesn't end when you continue to punish yourself. It ends when you decide to actually hold your own hand and walk through what hurts you with yourself. You gain your power back. You get the opportunity to build a relationship with yourself. When you punish yourself by avoiding the thing that hurts you, you only damage the relationship you have with yourself further, because you stay in a state of betrayal. You stay doing the things that hurt you, that hurt your life, that harm you overall, your future self. You want to stop feeling this way, this guilt, this anger, this frustration, or whatever it is, then you have to be willing to work with yourself. You have to be willing to tolerate yourself sometimes, be your own friend, best friend, whatever you want to call it. You are your own. And if you feel like that's not the case, if you feel like you barely know yourself, you barely know how to work with yourself, if you were to look at yourself, if you will, sometimes for the people out there that are parents, sometimes the way that you talk to your kids can be a reflection of how you talk to yourself. If you're a leader, a manager, the way that you talk to your subordinates is how you talk to yourself. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that can be reflective. And so if you're wondering what your self-talk might be, take a look at your child. Take a look at your subordinates. How encouraged do they feel? Do they feel like they can talk to you? Do they accomplish things in their life? And how do they feel when they accomplish these things? How do they feel when they're on the way to accomplishing these things? This can be a huge indicator as to how your relationship is with yourself. If your subordinates and your children are constantly feeling down, if they're almost lazy in their work ethic, ask yourself why. Yes, of course, there are variations. If we actually look at the real world, there are some people that are just straight up lazy and don't want to work. Yes. There are some people where their natural disposition is just to be more relaxed, and that's not a bad thing. But if you take that out of the equation, if this person is not even willing to get up and, I don't know, make the bed or whatever the situation is, like insert into this scenario what you will, ask yourself, is the environment one in which they can feel safe to do that, in which they feel encouraged? Say I had a kid, right? And I said, you need to get this mark in this test. And I only gave them love when they received that mark, or I neglected them of any sort of emotional feedback until they performed well in any test. I mean, that's going to mess that kid up if they perform negatively in a test and then I take away that love, right? So I'm then teaching them conditional love. This could apply to you. Take that example as you will. But that can be reflective of how you treat yourself. You see, in a state like that, you can't work with yourself because your inner child or your inner self or your most vulnerable self doesn't feel encouraged. They don't feel motivated to do any better because you don't give them space to do any better, because you're treating them conditionally well. So you're not going to even want to try if the only time you actually ever feel good is at the finish line, and that too if the finish line is a happy ending for the boss, the parent, if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm a bit rambly, but that can be a huge indicator as to what your relationship might be with yourself. And what I'm trying to get across to you is that you're allowed to work with yourself. You can be strict with yourself without being mean. You can be encouraging and warm without being a doormat. And I think this is where people go wrong. They think, oh no, in order to be strong, I must be like this. No, in order to be strong, you must allow yourself to experience the fullness of who you are. Know when it is that you're BSing yourself, but also know when it is that you've truly had enough. And both of these things, having that awareness is what makes you strong. And if you are somebody that takes pride in that identity of being strong, then do the scary thing. Do the scary thing, because that's what a strong person would do. Go and face yourself. The last thing that I want to say regarding why you might want to go to therapy, it kind of stems from the last point, which is that a lot of the time we don't want to go to therapy because we're scared of compromising our sense of selves. There is so much ingrained stigma and bias regarding therapy and what it means for us. A lot of people that are resistant to therapy are usually older. And I get it. Like I said, I'm not trying to shove anything down anybody's throat. It is your decision at the end of the day. But we often build up these ideas of who we are. And that's what makes us feel secure, what makes us feel grounded, what makes us feel like we have our ish together, like we can trust ourselves, that we can depend on ourselves, that we're confident because we've made it this far, that we're clearly healed because we've made it this far. And we have these ideas, and these ideas that we sort of ingrain in our sense of self. Going to therapy is like taking a hammer and shattering that sense of self. Because if you go to therapy and you find out something really scary about yourself, or you have somebody else who's perhaps younger than you telling you things that you don't want to hear, oh my God, ew, no, disgusting, don't have time for it. It's like I don't know if an ego death is the right way to put it, but what do you have then? What do you have then? When you think at this point you're the number one person that knows you, and then you go and you have somebody reflect something to you, not tell you who you are, never tell you who you are or what you're capable of, unless it's in a positive light, but reflect to you perhaps something that you've been running from for a really long time, something that you thought or think is not that big a deal, but actually it low-key is. Oh my God, what do you do then? Your plate is already so full. How do you take this on? How do you take on this change in identity that you didn't even want in the first place? I get it. It's intimidating. And as I'm a mere 23 years old, it's probably intimidating to an extent that I cannot even fully comprehend. I'm not here to take that experience away from anybody and say that you're not meant to be scared, that it's not right for you to feel intimidated. I'm not saying that your opinion in that is not valid. It's completely understandable. You've lived a certain amount of life. Going to therapy now, you're like, well, what's the point? I've made it this far. I know enough. Who is anybody else to tell me who and what I am and what I need to do with my life? I get it. Now, like I said, a therapist, for example, say you have a negative trait, well, let's call it negative because of the context, a negative trait of drinking a bottle of whatever every single day, like you're an alcoholic, okay? No, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to step on any toes or trigger anybody. Please just take this as you will. If this is too triggering for you, just click off or click forward. I'll put a timestamp, okay? Take the example of that. A therapist isn't going to look at you and be like, what are you doing in my office? You have issues. Who do you think you are? You can't be a parent, not like that. A therapist is not going to look at you like that and talk to you like that. They are there to help you. Maybe that alcoholism is coming from being neglected by one of your parents at a young age. Or maybe one of your parents died when you were quite young. Something, I don't know. I'm not a therapist, okay? Maybe it's coming from a severe heartbreak, right? The therapist's job is not to criticize your character and judge your character, like I said, and make you feel even worse about yourself. They might make you low-key feel worse, but not directly. It'll be because of the work that you're doing and the topics that you're talking about. But their job is not to make you hate yourself any more than you might already do. Their job is to turn that around. They are working in your favor. Heck, look at them like they're the universe if you have to. I'm not saying a therapist is your friend, definitely not, but a therapist is somebody that can allow you to plant the seeds of a healthier self in your mind. We often have such negative things in our minds that we're saying to ourselves, and this can come from what we've seen in the media, right? I'm so fat, I'm so this, and it's such a, negative way. I'm too this to be that, I'm too this, or someone like me couldn't XYZ, or no, my parents said this, so I will always be a failure. The therapist allows you to bring in the light. They allow you to bring in the positive. They allow you to be like, okay, you're doing great, amazing, but there's this thing that's hurting you. Let me help you with that. Oh, you keep disagreeing like this with your partner? Okay, let's talk about it. What is it about what they do that hurts you like that? Then this is what you might take into your personal life and then handle on your own as the empowered, strong individual that you are. Where you're like, okay, I had this discussion with my therapist, who is an intelligent, educated individual about people and our brains and how we work, right? They're unbiased in the situation, as unbiased as a person can be. and you take that into your personal life and you say, okay, the reason I argue with my partner when they do XYZ is because it makes me feel like I am not seen, or it makes me feel like I'm not beautiful. Now, depending on your situation, you might then go, and it depends on your partner as well, you might be like, okay, I'm going to ask my partner to come and sit down and have a discussion with me. They're really busy this week. I'm going to give them a text, heads up, be like, hey, I'd really love it if we could talk at XYZ time. Would you be able to make time for me for this? For like 10, 15 minutes, whatever, 5 minutes. Or it could be this instead, that when that trigger arises, you eventually come out and you say, I don't like what you just said to me. It makes me feel XYZ. You see, so therapy doesn't take away your autonomy. Therapy gives you the tools to see yourself in a new light. Whether it's a positive thing overall, like, actually, you know what, maybe I am capable of doing everything I wanted to do. And maybe my parents were wrong about what they said I was and was not capable of doing in my life. Someone like me. Or it could just be as small as, when someone says this, it hurts me like this. Because you know what? XYZ is important to me. My job and who I am at work is really important to me. And them not seeing that, them not seeing how important my job is or my professional life is, it makes me feel like this. And so you carry an awareness with you. You carry an awareness with you. It makes you a kinder person to yourself, to your partner, to your children, to your employees, to your colleagues, to the world at large. You cannot lose. You cannot lose. Now, one last thing before we get into the conclusion of this. I have had a few therapists over the years. I'm just having a quick think. I want to say 5. Honestly, I don't really remember. I had one throughout my teen years. I had one last year for some time. I tried one back in 2021. I had one earlier this year. And I had one through the NHS that I did CBT with. And then I had one briefly in university for like 2 sessions. So it's kind of been like a little bit here, there, a little bit there, right? With my therapy journey. Now, in this therapy journey, I'll be honest, I've had my favorites. And so what I want to say is there will be some therapists that you get along with better, that understand you better. Does it mean that the ones that you don't like aren't as good? Not necessarily. Sometimes yes, and I'll tell you that. I'll tell you about it. But they're people too. So, let me tell you a quick story. I had a trial session, paid £50 for it back in 2021 for this therapist. I want to say the worst therapy experience I have ever experienced, quite honestly, because it was my first session online. I went and said everything. This woman didn't even say anything to me. It's like the screen was basically frozen. She was like nodding at me, and she had no feedback, no conversation, nothing. Now maybe that's her style. I hated it, all right? And I never went back. I was like, that is it. Maybe I did 2 sessions to give her the benefit of the doubt. And then I was like, no, you're not taking my money anymore, you useless piece of... Anyway, never mind. I was not happy, let's just say, especially after opening up. But I'll also tell you this. The more you practice opening up, the easier it gets. And it's not that you suddenly treat your information like it's invaluable, or that is it invaluable or not valuable? Opposite of valuable. That it's just something that's available to anybody and everybody, anyone that's willing to listen. No. It's just that you get better about looking at your humanity as just a part of you, as just as normal as the sky being blue. Emotions, they don't have to be taboo. They don't have to be this, oh my god, wait until they find this out. No, the therapist deals with this all the time. Like, just how a doctor looks at buttholes. I'm sorry, but it's that. You know how women, sometimes we can get all like self-conscious because we have to go see the gynecologist and we're like, oh my god, like, oh, they're gonna see everything. They see everything all the time anyway. It's literally that. You get used to it. But getting to my point, I digress. Getting to my point, don't be put off. If the first therapist you try you don't mesh with, You don't have to stay with them. It's no insult. You want to be able to feel comfortable around the person you're working with. It doesn't mean that you agree about everything. It doesn't mean that you're like friends. It just means that you're allowed to mesh with the person. You're allowed to feel comfortable, and you should feel comfortable with them. If you do decide to go ahead with therapy, then don't feel guilty about not liking the first person that you talk to. It's kind of like dating as well. You're allowed to try a few. But once you decide, stick with the therapist, okay? Even if you're scared to go to them because the last session you talked about something that was really vulnerable, and now you're like, oh my god, now they know all this about me and they're gonna dig even deeper this week. They don't have to dig deeper if you don't want them to, okay? It's a space for you. If you want to go there and just bitch about everybody, go there and bitch about everyone. It's your session, babe. If you want to go there and you don't want to get into your childhood, you'd rather talk about what happened yesterday, talk about what happened yesterday. It's okay. And honestly, it allows them to actually get to know you better. What triggers you? What makes you feel upset in the day to day? And then they can actually study you in a way. And don't look at it like, oh my god, I'm under a microscope. They know everything. They don't know everything. They don't know everything, okay? But they can look at you and treat you. They can help you. Don't be afraid of bringing your full self to therapy. And your full self is not something that you should feel guilty about. So, my lovely ladies and gentle friends and everybody, thank you so much for making it this far, if you made it this far into the video. If you have any further misconceptions about therapy, then of course feel free, as always, to comment them down below. Anything else you want to add, of course, go ahead and do so. And for anybody that decides to go ahead with therapy, I'm so proud of you. If you don't, of course, I am with you, and I am proud of you for watching this video, for taking the time to invest in yourself and at least learn and be inquisitive. I think even if you choose not to go to therapy, if you're taking the time to sit with yourself and be with yourself and reflect upon why you do what you do and question whether or not it's actually healthy for you in your life, then you know what? I applaud that. For some people, therapy is the best medium. For others, it's not. And I'm not any authority to tell you what's right and wrong necessarily. But what I can say is that it's never a waste to look at yourself and to learn how to help yourself and be a kind person to yourself. Because like I said, you are your own constant and you want to be able to live with yourself at the end of the day. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Any comments or any questions, of course, leave them down below, and have a great day. I will see you in the next video. Bye.